to the study, to the Incorporation Committee, and we're going to get to that, all of that in a moment. We've got behind me our distinguished discussion panel, and we're going to get to them in a moment. But what I'd like to do first is just kick off with a little bit of a game plan for the evening. If I can get this working. Oh, 1 second. There we go. Okay. We've got three parts of the evening, and the first part and the last part are going to go very quickly so we can get to the middle part, which is why you're here. So we'll start just by giving a brief overview of where we are in the Okanagan Falls Incorporation study. We'll then jump in the discussion panel. I'm going to introduce our committee chair, Rick Wilson, to introduce that part of the evening, including our panelists behind me. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps as we end the evening at around 8 o'clock. We've got a really nice turnout. Thank you all for coming out. We've got a bunch of people online as well observing, so that's fabulous. Let's kick off. The first of all, as everybody knows, I think, and if you don't, I'm going to tell you in a second, but as everybody knows, what the study is an incorporation study. So basically what it's saying, what would a decision to create an Okanagan Falls municipality mean for the community in terms of three different things? One, your services. So who provides what services you get and who provides those. The second is governance or decision-making, who makes decisions for the community. And then the third is finances or property taxes. What would a decision to incorporate to create a new municipality mean in terms of the property taxes you have to pay as homeowners here in Okanagan Falls? You've had a chance, I think, if you've been following the study at all over the last year, you've had a chance to understand the boundary within which the new municipality would be created. So technically it's called the Incorporation Study Boundary Area, but we're simply calling it the potential new municipality if that's the decision the electors make. We are looking at two different options in the course of the study. The first is the status quo, and that's really the option that says, let's keep Okanagan Falls as part of Electoral Area D in the RDOS and have it as an unincorporated community within Electoral Area D. The second, and in that study, we have the regional district as the local government, as it is today, and we have the governing body as a 20-member board of directors for the regional district as it is today. And the community, as it is today, is represented by one electoral area director for all of Area D. The second option is to create the municipality. So a Okanagan Falls municipality incorporated as a separate municipality, a standalone entity. It would have a municipality as the local government, so it would take the place of the regional district in that sense. And there would be a municipal council that would have a mayor and 4 members of council. It would be the governing body that made decisions for the new entity. We've got a number of different findings for the study. I'm not going to go through them all. You'll be happy to know they are all identified and outlined at the study website. So RDOS Regional Connections. There's also hard copies in different places. We'll go through that a little bit later. And you can also have a look in your mailbox on the 18th, I believe, of October. You're going to be getting a second mail out. Everybody would have received the first mail out some time ago, which introduced the study, gave a bit of an overview of what it is the study was going to be focused on and examining. The new mail out will talk about some of the key findings in there. So have a look for that in your mailbox. Yes, sir. Is that better? Oh, I beg your pardon. Okay. Now I can hear myself now too. Okay. Do you want me to start all over again? No, I won't. Okay. That was a little too enthusiastic. So, 3 quick findings that I'll just mention here, and then we're going to move forward. So first is that the municipality, instead of the regional district, would be the primary local service provider. Not the only local service provider, but the primary provider. That's the first thing. The second is that the council, as I've already noted, would make most of the decisions for the municipality. And then the third is that a typical residence could expect a property tax increase of about $290. Those are the 3 key findings. Where do you get more information? Go to the website if you haven't been there already. How many people have been to the website for the study? Okay, perfect, great. The rest of you, I encourage you to go to the website. If you don't like going online, there's 2 documents or 2 big binders you can go look at as well. One is at the regional district office here in town. So have a look at that. We've got the mail outs I've talked about. One's already come out to you. One's going to be coming out to you imminently in the next couple of weeks. Have a look for those. We've got open houses. We've already had the open houses. Some of you came to those. Thank you very much for those. We have the discussion panel tonight, which is a key part, of course, of our engagement process. We have a number of small group meetings, which I'll be doing, I think, with 7 different groups in town. So everybody from the Parks and Recreation Commission to others. And then with the information binders I mentioned, the hard copies, if you don't like going online, go to the regional district office here, have a look at those. Our timeline, right now, we are in community conversations, summer, fall of 2024. Going forward, all the analysis has been done. Based on what we hear back from the public, we'll be wrapping up the final report, going to the committee. That will happen in the fall, a little bit later next month. And then we'll be going to the regional district before the end of this year, so in December 2024, with a recommendation on whether or not to proceed to referendum. If a referendum occurs, and incorporation can only happen through referendum, if a referendum is held, it would be held in the spring of 2025. Our discussion panel, a very important part of our engagement process. We brought together this group of people to answer questions, to give their perspectives on incorporation and the potential for incorporation. We're going to have some opening comments followed by a moderated question and answer period. So I'll be inviting everybody here to ask questions of the panel, and I'll be the moderator of that part of the process. I'm going to be doing a bit of a Phil Donahue at that point and going, because we're a little short on microphones, so I'll be going around and putting the microphone in your face, holding on to it. I'm not going to surrender it to you because I may not get back, but that's how we're going to do the Q&A. In the meantime, I'm going to pass it over to our committee chair, Rick Wilson, the chair of the Incorporation Committee, who is going to introduce our panelists and get us going on this part of the evening.
Thanks, Allan. Thank you. I've had the privilege of leading this fantastic committee that we've had over the last 16 months. And I'd like to introduce them, the ones that are here tonight. And I think they're all here but one. Kia is vice chair. Eleanor Walker. Kelvin Hall. Zach. Eugene Detling. The hardworking Judy Garner. Randy Ludwar. Marcel Osterud. And Debbie Rose. And we have 3 special guests tonight. And I'm just going to give you a brief bio of them, just so you have a bit of a history of what their knowledge is. We have Mayor Merlin Blackwell in the middle. Mayor Blackwell has served 4 terms as the District of Clearwater Mayor, also sits on the Thompson-Nicola Regional District Board, and is Vice Chair of the Regional Hospital Board. Before getting into politics, Mayor Blackwell worked in and managed Wells Gray Provincial Park for 30 years, worked as a writer in radio and magazines, and worked on several volunteer boards, including a stint as the president of the Clearwater Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Mayor Blackwell. On the far side is John Smith. He's the alternate director for the Columbia-Shuswap Regional District Area G, the newly created electoral area covering roughly the same size as was being considered for incorporation for Sorrento-Blind Bay. John spent 16 years with the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, 8 as the Chief Financial Officer and Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, followed by another 8 years as the Chief Administrative Officer. He also served for approximately 2.5 years as the chair of the Sorrento-Blind Bay Incorporation Advisory Committee. Welcome, John. And last but not least is Jason Johnson. Jason has worked in local and regional governments for 30 years. His experience ranges from human resources, land use, and strategic planning to economic development. His various roles include planner of economic development for the city of Merritt, manager of planning for the Central Okanagan Regional District, manager of human resources for the city of Kelowna, and chief administrative officer for the city of West Kelowna when it incorporated. He was also the CAO of the RDOS. So welcome, Jason. Also, thanks to Alan and his team. They've done a fantastic job. They're a pleasure to work with in all facets. So Alan, Sherry Hurst, and Natasha Horseman. Our area director, Matt Taylor, up the wall. And alternate director, Jim DeAndre. And I'd like to thank Christy Malden and Mark O'Coin and Kim Romer and all the staff at the RDUS who have done a fantastic job to keep us on the straight and narrow and provide all the services that we need through this process. And it's been many. So having said that, Alan, you want to kick it off? Let's go.
Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you. And I will say just, I do think Rick needs some acknowledgement as well. He has been a fabulous chair, tireless in his efforts on behalf of the community and working for the community. So thank you very much to Rick. Okay, now for the main event. We've got three gentlemen up here, each of whom represents a slightly different take on incorporation. My very good friend Jason was the first, and Rick mentioned this, the first CAO of the newly incorporated West Kelowna. So he's going to bring a different perspective than the other two gentlemen. Jason's perspective will speak a little bit about more from the administration side and what a new municipality could expect to encounter as we enter, as it entered into a new incorporation, if that's what people choose. My our mayor, I beg your pardon, Mayor Blackwell from Coldwater. I've met Merlin several times, but only online at different events such as this. So it's a pleasure to meet him in person today. His reputation precedes him. He is a tireless advocate of local government and a leader in local government. So it's great to see Merlin here. Merlin is the, as John mentioned, or as Rick mentioned, excuse me, is the mayor of Clearwater. And Clearwater, for those of you who maybe don't know, was not too long ago incorporated. So Merlin brings some very helpful firsthand experience in that. And then my good friend John on the other side of Merlin, John and I worked together in the Sorrento-Blind Bay Incorporation Committee. So he'll give us a slightly different perspective. All these different perspectives coming together. We wanted very much to bring a balanced approach to this event, as we have to all of our engagement efforts and our study. I've asked each of these gentlemen to start with some opening comments. So I'm going to, well, I'll ask these. Would anybody like to volunteer to start?
Never volunteer for anything.
Okay, great. Well, I always defer to a politician. So go ahead, Mayor. Why don't you kick off with some opening comments?
Yeah, thank you. Everybody hear me? Good. I'll try to keep it close to the mic. So a little bit about Clearwater so you understand where I'm coming from. Clearwater is a town currently of about 2,500 people. When we incorporated in 2007, it was about 2,200 in that range. Clearwater as a community had existed for quite a long time, probably 100 years now, but had never been incorporated. We incorporated at the same time as Barrier and I believe Sun Peaks as well. So all three communities up in the valley that were part of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District basically incorporated at the same time. So I got involved in Clearwater pre-incorporation, trying to start things up because the economy was a little flat. There wasn't a lot going on. We'd had 2 bars, 2 gas stations closed. We had a grocery store that was on its last legs, and nobody seemed to want to start the place in a direction. So that's why I got on Chamber of Commerce, got on the official community plan committee and a few other things that were sort of bouncing around before that. So we've been incorporated since 2007. I was not on the first council term was actually 1 year, and then there was a 3 after that. So after that, I got on. I actually did 2 terms as a councillor, still running my business in Wellsbury Park before being elected to mayor 2018 or something. Seems like a century ago. Yeah, so I've sat on, the business side looking in, and as a counselor on the inside looking out and seeing what the community needed. So I kind of said that Clearwater really wasn't seemingly to go anywhere prior to incorporation. So what has incorporation brought us over the last few years? A big one for me is advocacy, and I'll get into that a little bit larger, but basically the biggest thing and why I was in support of incorporation prior to it actually succeeding as incorporation, and Clearwater actually did 3 failed attempts before, people decided to vote in favor of incorporation. It brought a lot of new things in, especially developments. We got a new grocery store, we have a new mall, there's a couple new hotels. Things started to get spruced up, but it's definitely not about business. Clearwater mirrors a lot of things I'm seeing in this room. We have 54% of the population would consider them, they don't consider themselves seniors, because you're not seniors until you want to be a senior. But according to the government of Canada, they fall into that category, right? So I have 70, 80-year-old seniors going, I'm here to help at the seniors lunch. You are the seniors. No, I'm just a helper. I'm not a senior yet. So a lot of things like community organizations popped up and really started to gel. We have, in the first 10 years, we're able to receive $30 million plus in grants that would not be achievable other than being a municipality. That has led to things like a very successful seniors housing complex. It's townhouses, row houses. Selena Robinson came up and opened the second or third phase. I think we're 176 units, and we're the same population roughly as you, so think about that. We have 2 fair market society-run apartment blocks. I know that you have that sort of thing here as well. You have a beautiful community. I did a great drive around here. You have a lot going on for you. The condition of this community is spectacular. That really helps a lot of the things that would trip me up as far as incorporation. But what really blossomed were things like recreation programs, all sorts of clubs and things like that, hiking trails, walking trails, things that we could get grants for, things that we weren't spending local tax money on, we were spending federal and provincial tax money on, trails networks, developing the beach, fixing a lot of things that would have been 10, 15, 20-year projects to try to fund, we were able to do in a short matter of time. Beyond that, the biggest thing that I think has been a success of incorporation, and I'm not full corporation cheerleader, so there are things that have come along that have been a bit of a pain in the butt, but it's the ability to advocate for your community. You all of a sudden have a voice, myself as mayor and our team as council, that can get the attention of the provincial and federal governments in a way that you just can't as an RD. RDs are getting stronger by the day, but I can call, Jason is actually doing a little consulting work for us. I did a call asking for a meeting with the Attorney General on a Thursday, and I could have done it on Monday, but I was too busy, so she had to wait till Tuesday. So the ability to access the provincial government when you have pressing matters, the ability to advocate for your hospital, for your doctors, for keeping the court services in town, for all these little things that tend to get drawn away from small towns as far as services and shrink back to the larger cities. We've been able to put up a fairly good fight to retain almost all of those sort of things. And we also had the ability when our mill went down, Canfor, we had Canfor, I hear you had a warehouser that went down, to get the best deal possible and have a seat at the table when we're talking about retaining tenure and things like that. It was not a good deal. There's no win there, but at least we had at the seat table to get compensation for people, to get bridging funding for people to retrain or to bridge into retirement. There's just so many things. Interior health, I could call up on a daily basis, RCMP, my MLA, cabinet ministers, and they call back. This morning, last thing I'll say, talked to former health minister Terry Lake, because we have a gap. We need assisted living between the seniors housing and the long-term care. He hooked me up with the developer this morning. We're starting a conversation. That is not something that can easily be done unless you have the advocacy of a council. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much, Merlin. Thank you. John, why don't we kick off with your opening comments? And we'll let you share Merlin's microphone there. There we go.
Okay, you hear me? Okay, basically, as was mentioned, I was the chair of the Sorrento-Blind Bay Incorporation Advisory Committee. And just to let you know, right off the bat, tell you that that was a very unique situation. Unlike this one where you got a yes or no vote. The yes means you get incorporation, the no means the status quo. In Sorrento-Blind Bay, that was not the case at all. basically, a yes meant that the designated area would become a corporation. But a no meant that that area plus a little bit more would immediately be carved out of existing Area C that it's in and become its own electoral area. And that basically would set it in position so that later down the road, if there was a desire, in case it failed, and when it failed, that they could go at this again. And you all already had all the work done by Allan and the committee, and you had cost in that. So it'd be an easy thing to just, reinstate it and let's get going on this thing to see if there was a change of heart. Now, the advisory committee, under Mr. Neilson's guidance, it was, first of all, it was supposed to go for 14 months. It went for 2.5 years. And under his guidance, we developed what we all considered on the committee a fair and objective model of what both scenarios would look like: incorporation and a new Area G. And the study concluded in the end that both options were feasible and actually similar in cost. There was a slight difference, but nothing serious, not enough to tell you to hell no, for one side, or hell yes. It was roughly the same, so it matters, did you want to do this or not? Okay. The ultimate vote on this thing was a resounding no. Way up there, it was up there 80% or something like that. So there was no question. In truth, although the committee sensing that there was very little chance of success on the referendum, screwing any other outcome than the no, they wanted to give the residents their chance to have their say, and also to quantify what you have from the people. Was it going to be close? Was it not going to be close? And so what we got was a resounding no, and we know that. Okay. And bottom line is, just like this committee, we were not there to sell incorporation. We were there to present the situation, what it would look like, and then have the people decide whether that was for them or not. Okay. To the committee, it was irrelevant, okay, what the vote was. Unless individually, some of them, we all had our druthers. So why was the vote deemed to failure in Sorrento-Blind Bay? And I think that there's a few reasons. Mr. Neilson had suggested from my remarks that I would give him my impression of the citizens, of the residents' concerns, thinking that maybe it was the relatively large road network, there's a lot of roads in that area, whether it was the perceived split between Sorrento and Blind Bay, because they're essentially two different areas, but they intermingle completely. Or was it the tax implications relating to policing and other things? Quite frankly, all three of those things probably had some impact, but I don't think that they were the major issues. The issues, as I see it, and I think as the committee see it, were pretty much three. Okay, the first was that the impetus for incorporation primarily came from the electoral area director. Okay, and not the residents. The residents of the area were fairly happy, content with the regional district. Taxes were relatively low. There were no concerns, and when there were concerns, they were being dealt with. So the residents, as a whole, were in the idea of, don't come in here and screw things up for me. I like it here. I like the way things are. And so that's very hard to overcome. You've got to have a compelling reason and tell the people, show them what it is, and show them that you actually have the ability under municipality to make things continue to be good and actually maybe become better, as I was saying, happened in Clearwater. The second part of this thing, another major one, was the timing for the exercise in Sorrento-Blind Bay couldn't have possibly been worse. We had, I think, 2 meetings. Matt was there. He actually came up for the meeting. And we had a big crowd. He was there, and much like what you see now. That's good. That's where I can talk to you. And if you got a question, I can answer your question, and you're going to get it. You're going to get the truth. And Allan's there to help us out with all this stuff. Except that after the second meeting, COVID hit. Okay. the government then put in, the ban on having, collective meetings. So we couldn't have the people. So now we're stuck with two choices. Okay, the first one was to take a hiatus, which we did. That's why it took 2.5 years and not 14 months. And the second was when we finally said, this thing ain't gonna end like really soon. So let's continue on in this exercise. So we're here now and we'll try what we can do with Zoom. Gotta tell you, I hate Zoom with a passion. And if Allan says we have a bunch of people on Zoom, we never got that. You know, we had an area that we're talking about 5,000 residents. We were lucky to get 15, 5 sometimes. And so bottom line is, who are you talking to? You know, what Allan did and the CSRD did was they set up a website where it answered all the questions that people had, that people could post them online. And the website was extraordinarily well done. You know, you couldn't ask for anything better, except nobody goes on to a regional district website. I was astounded when I saw these hands go up when Allan asked that question, because we never got that. And I don't know how many times I went on there. I mean, it's just overwhelming, and people aren't, if you don't have any really concern, why would you bother? Okay, but if you hold a meeting like this, you will come. You will hear what the guy has to say, and you are going to get answers. And so if there's a loud person, that person's going to answer, you're going to hear both sides. And that's what we want. But probably what I consider the biggest reason for failure was there was an incessant social media assault, you know, on the proposal. And it included deliberate mis and disinformation. In this area, the director at the time, who was on the board, and his predecessor, for 3 decades, had never once been able to pass any plebiscite, any project through the committee, because there were those voices who did letters to the editor, you know, big to rambling, and they basically thwarted every single thing, you know, that was brought out. And the director and his predecessor I dealt with when I was the chair, they were at wit's ends. And so they figured this incorporation idea would basically get the decision-making over to a council, that they could do stuff without having to go and ask these people and letting this guy have at him. And if he did, he had to have at him in council in person. Okay, so, and the disinformation was really bad. I mean, Allan helped as he could with some of the people. I did. We talked to person. That was just the time when you got your assessments. Remember when your assessments went through the roof? That happened to be right then too. And so these people on the social media said that your taxes are therefore going to go through the roof as well. They're going to double or triple, you know, and there it is. And we had no way of countering that because we didn't have a group like this where you could go. We actually put out the pamphlet, and where I put in a formula, put your numbers in here, and this is what it'll cost you. You can calculate. How many people would do that? I don't know. But bottom line is, those people, you know, were there, and they dogged the community for 30 years. And it was almost impossible to overcome when we couldn't have a public meeting like this and talk to them. The one thing on those taxes, we had the meeting, he was there, you know, right at the end, and asked, oh, and it was on Zoom. He asked the question on Zoom. We answered the question on Zoom, and we told, and I think as you all know, that when it comes to your assessments, you're only going to pay more taxes if yours goes up more than others, okay? Except that the province adds a little bit into it, which you could get away if you're municipality. They came on 2 days. You agreed with that? You're fine? You're happy? Yeah, this was on the Zoom, except there's only 5 or 6 people. 2 days later, it was on social media, you know, saying that your taxes are going to go up 200, 300%, and that they named off some areas where they actually went bankrupt, which never, that didn't happen. And so that's the kind of thing that you're trying to fight, and you couldn't get there. So I guess the question is, after we had all this, and we basically knew the writing was on the wall on this, did anything of value arise out of the exercise? Cost a whole lot of money and took a whole lot of work by people? Absolutely it did. 2 things happened. First of all, the Minister of Transportation, we did a deal with, on all the financing. The Minister of Transport actually came in there and, when the assessment was done of all the roads, there was 18 kilometers, I believe it was, of roads that were said that they were in very poor condition. They came in and resurfaced every one of them. 18 kilometers. That's the first I saw those guys in the community in 10 years. So it's all done and it still works because you don't have a lot of traffic. And so we're good there. That happened. And that's free. The second thing that we did get the new electoral area. It's now not C anymore. We've got electoral area G, which is the Sorrento-Blind Bay area, plus a little more, plus C is the remainder. Okay. And so you now have a situation where if the residents do find reason to want incorporation, you are now set up to do that. Okay, you now have the area, you now have background information. And trust me, it's in that website, and it's probably going to stay there forever, because it probably will come up again. And then when we have a chance to have meetings like this, we can tell you exactly answer to your question instead of you hearing from the guy screaming in the back. I know this from like being at the TNRD, for 16 years, and we had probably went to 100 meetings there. You get people come, and most people want to listen. They don't want to ask questions. They don't want to speak. But there's some guy who comes, maybe had a few drinks or that, and he's going. But you can handle it. So bottom line is, in hindsight, what's done was good. I think it's really good. And we have a new director who's done very well. And I actually offered, when I looked at her resume, I offered to become her alternate. Not to teach her, not to do anything. It's just I can be there if she wants some information. And to how to go and gain allies at the board. The previous two people pounded on the table for 30 years, and it didn't work. They were drawn into services they didn't want. And with the situation where they were drawn into recreation, where the big recreation center in Salmon Arm was paid like 30% by our area. We're 25 miles away. 20 miles away, nobody goes, use that. And so you want to deal with it. And now what's coming up is they're going to want to build a new one at $70 million.
Yeah.
That could be an issue.
Thank you very much, John. That's awesome. Let's move on and get our third speaker, Jason, to give his opening comments.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Alan. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And what we see here is the interest about OK Falls and what does it look like moving forward. And that's a wonderful opportunity and wonderful conversation to have. I was the former RDOS CAO when I went back to Kelowna when West Kelowna incorporated. Unlike Blind Bay, the three options for West Kelowna were amalgamate with Kelowna, incorporate, or stay the same. The reason that West Kelowna incorporated is because it outgrew the regional district legislation. The regional district legislation is old. It's been in place since the late 60s, early 70s, and it really hasn't stayed up and stayed current with the legislation. So when you're in a regional district service and everybody's participating on it, it's a weighted vote. And Kelowna was 73% of the vote. They were what was called the benevolent dictators, right? And when the vote happened, unlike Blind Bay, it was 49% not in favor and 51% in favor of incorporation. The first council that was elected, the mayor that was elected, ran on a platform of disincorporation, along with one other member of council that didn't want the municipality to exist. So similarly, West Kelowna, the first council was in place for 18 months, and that was by design, not to give them a 4-year term, but to get the municipality started and get it working. But we were against the public. A lot of people were calling us, we were West Kelowna, but we really didn't have a name. We were looking at different names for the community, things like West Kelowna, I think it was Lakeside, and West Bank. And oh boy, those folks from West Bank wanted the name to be West Bank, and that took over the discussion once incorporation happened. And let me tell you, when they changed the name from what our incorporation was and kept it as West Kelowna, the people from West Bank showed up. There were about 400 of them in a room like this, and boy, were they unhappy. So as much as you like to think that incorporation is going to be the panacea to solve everything, it's going to come up with a lot of other issues. One thing I can tell you is the reason that West Kelowna was successful was this man. Allan put together the incorporation documents, and that was essentially our blueprint. If we hadn't have had that, we wouldn't have known some of the things that we were walking into. Having said that, what you have to do with incorporation is drive the best deal possible with the province. That deal is critical to your success. The transferring of RCMP, roads, all of that needs to be into your incorporation document so that you can know what that looks like and know what deal that you're getting. Because make no bones about it, the province would like you to incorporate. They spend a lot of tax money here that comes from general revenue because you pay into that general revenue taxation, as well as you're paying through the RDOS. So control comes at a cost. And that cost means that you're going to be paying a bit more. And Allan, as he mentioned, you know, $281 extra onto your taxes. I think I got that right. You know, that's a big cost to have that control. But when you've got things at the regional district, you've got 20 other partners that are there voting on it. And I would bet that you probably sometimes feel a little bit lost when you go to the regional district. Sending people up to Penticton. A developer comes to town, they have to go to Penticton. They don't actually stay in the community here. Having that service and having that ability to reach out and touch the people that are actually providing it is invaluable. You'd have a mayor and council that are really here and their interest is really only at OK Falls. And what happens with those directors is they appoint somebody to the RDOS. And if they're not looking after OK Falls, guess what happens? The council can unappoint them from being the regional director, right? So there's a lot of control that comes when you come in with it. Now, I think I've talked a little bit about the deal. I don't want to talk much more about that, but think of if you become incorporated, you're actually buying the business from the RDOS. So what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is you're transferring those services from the RDOS, and because they're BCGEU, they have successorship rights. Meaning, if you're taking on planning, and there's folks that are losing their jobs at the Penticton office, you actually have to take those staff and bring them here because you've bought the business. So you really have to think about that and think about how you transition those services. And it's really important that you get the right hires at the beginning. You've got to get people that want to work really hard, because I'm going to make no bones about it. Being a newly incorporated community is a lot of hard work. When I think about my career, I've been the city manager in Victoria. I've been the city manager for West Kelowna. That was the pinnacle of my career, right? Starting up that, I was the first person that was hired. By the time I left, we had about 250 staff members. And when you first start incorporation, you've got the public that has a whole bunch of expectations. As the first employee that was hired, I was getting bylaw enforcement complaints, and I'm like, I'm not the bylaw guy, right? But people, because you voted to incorporate and your taxes are going up, expect that service right away. And you have to have a methodical transition of services so that you can bring them on in a way that makes sense. So having that incorporation document that Allan's put together really gives you the guide map, but you need to bring somebody in that wants to work really hard and has a vision about how the community will come together. What I can tell you is we had the incorporation document. We had the mayor that ran on a vision of disincorporation. It took about 6 weeks to get the mayor on board with the rest of council, and we did that by strategic planning. So people will come together with their different platforms, but as a group, they come together for a common purpose, right? Even though we might not have changed her mind that incorporation was or wasn't a good thing, she was the mayor of the community. And the council said, here are the things that we want you to concentrate on. She now had to follow along with what the population wanted, and 51% wanted incorporation. So that transition plan is really important. Hiring the right staff is important. And you also have to remember is those staff that get originally hired, they have to grow with the municipality, right? Because what happens when you hire and you've got, you know, the first CAO in there, they're dealing with bylaw enforcement, and then gradually they extricate that from themselves, but they have to grow with the municipality, right? As you get more and more staff, it becomes more and more sophisticated and the staff have to grow with it. And make no bones about it. Right now, recruiting in local government is extremely hard. We just went through it in Clearwater. They went through a number of CAOs. And let me tell you, the strain on the organization of going through that recruitment process is really hard. And you have to get those decisions right. And you have to be able to make changes as you move along. So what I'm here to tell you is this is great that you're having this meeting. It's great that eventually, hopefully you're going to go to a referendum and the community will decide what to do. But the work doesn't just stop when that vote is done for incorporation. There is a ton of work, and it's about managing expectations of the community. Just because you voted to incorporate doesn't mean that you're going to have planning services day one. You've got to start methodically with building the budget. You don't have a filing system. You have to have a filing system that comes into place. There's a lot of key components of governance that you have to put into place. But having this community conversation is really important. This is something that's been talked about in this community for a number of years. I worked with former director Bill Schwartz, who was talking about incorporation back in the early 2000s. So it's great that we're at this point here. You've got the ultimate guru in local government in Allan. This is the work that he does. Trust what he does. He will keep you on the right path. And I'm certainly here to answer any questions that you might have based on what my experience has been at the RDOS, West Kelowna, or Victoria. I'm here to answer any questions I can for you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you, gentlemen. What a wealth of experience we have up here. We're talking all about this evening. We're talking all about the pros, the cons, the opportunities, the challenges. And really, when I say we're talking, this is where you come in, because today is all about having an opportunity for you to get some answers to some questions you have. So some of you will want to listen to what your neighbors say, and that's great. And if there's lulls in the conversation, I've got a list of questions that I'm burning to ask, but I'm going to turn it over to you first. Who's going to be brave and ask a question? Come on over here, sir.
My biggest thing is I look around me and I see everybody here about my age. I was here at 10 years old walking down Main Street, and there was a vacant lot that was, everybody knows, as the flea market. So what did the RDOS do for us with a flea market? When did they do anything for us? We have a water system that's garbage. We can't get any extra money without, we can't get grants through the RDOS. We can through incorporation. We need to change. If the RDOS would have taken care of this, I wouldn't be against them, but I'm totally against them. My name's Brad Weeb, and I'm proud to say I'm against them just because of what they haven't done here for my lifetime. What are you going to do for the next generation? Don't you want something? The other thing I have to say is, where are all the 30 and 40-year-old people? How come they're not here taking in this stuff? Right? I'm sorry for the ones that are.
The one.
Right? Right? And there's one behind me. I'm sorry. There you go. But you know what I mean? Like,
50 is the new 30.
what happened here? What happened to this town? It just seemed like it just died. Everybody wanted an OK Falls to be the OK Corral. That died a long time ago. We need to go into the future, and I'll stop there.
Oh, Brad, before you go, did you have a question in there?
Did I have a question in there?
Think we
Is something going to bring us into the future rather than looking at the OK Corral?
Okay, perfect. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Let me go, and I'll go to Jason, who's got his hand up. Maybe respond to that if you could, Jason.
Yeah, it's, the regional district legislation is really limiting. When you do a subdivision and you want to have curb, gutter, sidewalk, there's nobody to maintain it because that doesn't fall within the regional district legislation. That's why West Kelowna came into existence, is because it was an urban municipality, but dealing with rural legislation, right? So you get the Hatfields and the McCoys, right? You get an irrigation district that's only looking after just water, or you get a fire department that is only just looking after fire. When you get a municipality that comes together, the fire department is a referral. So if you're building a building more than 5 stories, you need a ladder truck. The a fire department needs to be part of that conversation. You know, in the regional district legislation, if you want to put a street light in, you have to create a new service to put that street light in. You don't have to do that as a municipality because you get broad powers under the community charter. So it's different legislation, gives you different opportunities for control that the regional district doesn't have. Now, if you like that rural community, right? If you're, you know, you've got rural Karamias, you've got rural Osoyoos, you've got rural Oliver, but this is different than what that is. You have a downtown area here. You've got people that identify with OK Falls. People don't say I live in, you know, area D. They say I live in OK Falls. So you have that community that you've already established. And it's depending on whether or not you want to make that next step in your process. What I likened the West Kelowna experience was when we first started, we were infants. Then we went through our toddler phase. And trust me, we were toddlers dealing with the elected officials at the regional district board, the Central Okanagan, because we were doing everything new. They called us the mistake by the lake for a number of years, right? And that's a tough place to be in as a staff member when people are calling you the mistake by the lake. We had to prove to people that what we were doing was worthwhile, that you could see some incremental change. And we were very clear about what we could and couldn't do so that we weren't actually trying to meet everybody's expectations. It's, we're bringing in finance here. We're going to bring in planning here. This is what you can expect. And the community is the one that elected the mayor and council, and they gave them the direction, as opposed to one electoral area director that gets a weighted vote, and it depends whether it's a regional service, a sub-regional service, or an electoral area service. And let me tell you, as an electoral area service, the rest of the board directors are going, I don't really care about that, right? And it's different when you're in a municipality. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jason. I've got the other two speakers who would like to chime in as well. John, why don't you start? We'll try to keep them to about a minute each, but go ahead,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, basically to answer that question, like, where are you gonna get some services and that? Like when I was at the TNRD, basically we had over 100 what I would call hamlets, like little places or clumps of people, and like OK Falls would be one of them. You know, they visit NRD was. We had over 100 of them, and we had well over 100, almost 150 different services, all over 20,000 square miles. And so bottom line is, if you wanted to have one service, well, we only got so many people, and you got to get in line. I basically had a to-do list where looking at all the electoral areas, and we had 10 of them, you know, and I probably had like 15 things we're doing for each one. And so bottom line is, you're not the top of the list. You're on the list, but there's only so many people. And that's an issue. If you become, there's the advantages of if you actually are a municipality, you can take care of that stuff. You don't need to go and establish the services, Jason was saying, where we have to have the public meetings like this. We'd have to have a vote. We do all the bylaws to do all this stuff. It's bureaucracy coming out your ears. As a municipality, they can just do it. Okay, and that's the thing that they want. In Sorrento-Blind Bay, the one thing that they wanted to do was be able to take care of emergencies. You know, a slide comes down and blocks the road out in the lake. Well, they can't do it. They got to get the CSRD and they got to call highways. And so sometimes it might sit there for 2 days. Whereas if you had a municipality, you send the works guys out there and they're going to deal with it. Okay, and as mayor and council, you have the authority to do that.
Thank you, John. Merlin, did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, just really quickly, because Clearwater's scale is essentially very close to what you have here in OK Falls, and I drove around here. You have a town already. You're just not representing yourself as a government and having that town. So, you know, you hear all these things and these positions and these things that sound like they're going to cost money. For example, the discussion with Terry Lake and getting the developer this morning, I referred that to our contracted part-time economic development officer. And economic development is not generally a function of regional districts, but we have somebody that's going to work for us for a while, not full-time. She does economic development. She knows exactly what to tell developers. She knows exactly what to tell this person. She has a package in front of her to tell them all the facts that they need to attract seniors housing to our town. We contract planning services from the regional district because we're not busy enough. So we pay for what we need. We can contract that service. You don't necessarily always have to hire a planner and a truck and $140,000 at $42 an hour. You don't necessarily need to do that. You can find part-time people. You can find people that are shared with other communities. That's what Barrier and Sun Peaks did. Bylaw. Bylaw officers and animal control are really interesting.
Interesting, a job that nobody wants.
Interesting, a job that nobody wants, and occasionally you find, we just found the right person that wants that kind of job.
Yeah.
And only wants to work part-time. Worked in government for 30 years. The discussion is 100 people come to council and say, you need to do something about dogs. So you can contract that out and you can get a little bit of service in that. The reality is you have 6 dogs that are a problem. But you don't necessarily need to go ahead and hire a dog control / bylaw officer because it's not the same function. Because all of a sudden you're a truck, a person, and a pound that's $180,000 and you're $250,000. You have enough communities around you and enough people that fortunately have retired out of those services that I'm quite sure that there's a supply of human beings that could do these types of jobs, not necessarily as a full or even a part-time employee, a contract employee. So that is some of the advantages that I see with the tightness and just the community that you live in. And your community is in fantastic condition as far as the bones go, the roads, the things that you'd have to look after. So.
Thank you, Merlin. That's excellent. Sir, you had a question.
My name is Dave Stewart. I'm a president of the senior center here in town. We're talking about building, we're talking about younger families coming in. There's a building, we're talking about building just over here where the flea market was, a new one. And when we incorporate, if and when we incorporate, will we end up having to have a different building code than the municipality? Will we have to produce one and use it before anything in this town gets built?
No, yes and no, and I'll let Jason, or the other two can answer this. Basically, when Clearwater started, we started with the regional district bylaws. The first, I'm going to say 8 years were boilerplate work, which was basically deciding in which order and which ones we needed to pass and change to tailor to the community we wanted. And part of that was official community plan. You have an official community plan? Yeah, you do that. So that's a great help because you already have a guiding document for what people around this area want as far as the shape of a community goes. After that, I'm at the point now as second term mayor and the second mayor of Clearwater, I'm redoing some of the original bylaws of Clearwater. So we're refreshing things that are, they're only 15 or 18 years old, but need to be looked at again. And that is the kind of thing that you can do when you're incorporated. You can say, okay, we have an issue with the ability to control water hookups. Well, let's just redo the bylaw and we'll bring a new bylaw to the table within a couple of months. These things that come out of nowhere that will stagnate for years and years because you can't react to them, because at an RD you might be dealing with 20 people that need to vote in favor of the way you want, and it may not be the priority. You can do it at a council table, you can do it in your office.
And I'll just mention as well, just to follow up on Merlin's point in response to the gentleman's questions, that yes, quite right, that as Merlin mentioned, a new municipality would need to ultimately have its own bylaws. It would start off using a regional district bylaw and then ultimately customize those. The building bylaw sets out the types of processes that are going to be in place to get building permits. The building code's a little bit different. The building code is a technical document put out by the provincial government, which says in essence that every building in British Columbia outside of the city of Vancouver, which has its own building code, but every building in British Columbia in a municipality that chooses to have a building inspection service must meet these technical standards. That would apply here, both pre and post incorporation. But as Merlin mentioned, the bylaw through which that's applied and the processes under which that's applied would ultimately be different here. Would that slow down the building? Any thoughts on that? Anybody wish to comment on that? Okay. Just go ahead, John.
unless you wanted.
I was just gonna say, that wills automatically, if Okanagan Falls were to incorporate, the bylaw that's in place right now automatically applies to the area. So that would continue to be used until, as Merlin mentioned, the council of the day chose to start replacing those bylaws. I think,
And
Jason, go ahead.
in a lot of cases too, when the municipality first starts, you'll contract with the regional district for a lot of these services until you can take it over. So out of the hop, are you going to run into building permit issues? Probably not. Moving forward, you get to put your own stamp on what those building bylaws look like because the mayor and council would be the approving them ultimately.
Yeah, based on that, you are going to inherit almost all of the bylaws that the regional district had in place. And so what the regional district could do, you can do. And what you're also going to do, because you have no staff, like if you had Jason, he's not going to do everything. And so you're going to have a contract with the regional district to do these things, and then you're going to transition over and take them over.
I think over here we had a question, then, okay, we're starting to get some action. That's great. We're starting to get some good questions. I mean, the initial questions were very good as well. Yes, we're starting to get some people wanting to ask questions.
I just understood from an earlier session that if we do vote for incorporation, the provincial government will give us some funding and some support. And I'd just like you to answer that.
Thank you very much. And I would like to actually touch on this question with the panel, because I had mentioned earlier to the community in some of our meetings that as this lady said a moment ago, that yes, there is, and Jason, you mentioned this in your opening comments, there is the provincial offer of assistance, which lays out what kind of financial assistance the province is going to give to a new municipality. That's all laid out. But Jason, as you mentioned, the amount of work required to set up the municipality is not insignificant.
No.
What kind of assistance is available to a new municipality to find its way to get the transitional place? It can be assistance from the province, from the regional district, from whomever. What's your thinking?
It's got to be a partnership all the way around, right? Because you're starting off new, you don't have any staff, you've got some offers assistance from the provincial government. But let me tell you, the province is looking to divest itself from this because they'll be saving some tax dollars, right? That's what's in it for them. Driving the best deal for incorporation needs to be on the top of mind of the Incorporation Committee. I'm doing some work, thankfully to Mayor Merlin here, and I'll tell you that the incorporation document was something that came up 2 weeks ago. There's a bridge in town. That bridge, they call it the Blue Bridge. The incorporation document said that the province is responsible for the structural components of that bridge. So Argo Road Maintenance came along and said, we'll fix the structural component, but all the rest of this is on you. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And at a community of the size of Clearwater, that's not insignificant. A 1% tax increase is about will generate about $25,000. You're looking at, 10% tax increase to look at this bridge that really hasn't come to fruition until about 17 or 18 years later. And guess what? The province goes, this is the deal that you made. This is all we're going to put into it. So make your best deal now. Now's the time to do it, because if you don't, and you don't look after that stuff, you're going to have some big surprises. And we were lucky because Allan did the incorporation documents, and he said, you're going to have a tax increase of 5% for the next 5 years. So that's a 25% lift. And council stuck to that. And they said very clearly, we're not going to go outside of what you voted on for incorporation, which was you're going to have a 5% lift every year. We're able to do it a little bit less than that in some cases. In an election year, go figure. But this is the thing, is you then have the control that you don't have now. And it depends if that's what you want. And that's what the vote is all about.
Thank you, Jason. Maybe I can just ask a follow-up to Merlin. We've heard, we're starting to kind of get into, we've heard a little bit about, and I know this is an issue that has come up in our discussions with the community thus far, the idea of a trade-off between, on the one hand, higher property taxes, and on the other hand, greater local decision-making authority. Can you comment on that trade-off, on is one worth the other kind of thing?
Yeah, it is. Roads, roads fortunately you're having taken care of right now, but for District of Clearwater, we have more roads per human being than any other community in BC. And I'm really glad to see that you've taken a very tight map of very dense populated areas or used areas as your boundaries. That's very important. Excellent decision already. Stick to it. But, you know, citizens of Clearwater came back to us and said, you know, things are not getting fixed as far as potholes and roads in the way that we would want. So council last year said, okay, we're going to add 3% to taxation. Is everybody okay with that? So that we can start sprucing up the roads. That's, and we've done that basically every year, I think actually for a couple of years now. We backed off during COVID because we had to be sensitive to the suffering of the community. We're heavily tourism based, most of it European. So it took quite a hit. But yeah, I mean, you can make those decisions to tailor what your community wants at that table. I use the saying, take all requests, but only play the songs that make sense. You listen to the community, but there's certain things that they're going to tell you that don't make economic sense, political sense, and you have to go back to those citizens and say, listen, we can't do this. This is not the right time. We can't do this. We can never afford this. There are balances back and forth on what you are able to do, but you get to make that decision and you get to have that conversation directly with your citizens. It's not somebody out there or way out there on the tip of an island.
Thank you very much. Right here at the front, and keep your hands coming up and right here at the front.
I just have a question. In the past, we had a irrigation district. In the past, the irrigation district and everybody who worked on the irrigation district also did our cemetery and our parks. It was brought to everyone's attention in town that we would be able to increase the irrigation district and get more funding for it to replace things if we basically gave it and our parks to the regional district to look after. So in the past, this town was able to do several things for themselves. Build a senior center, get another one underway, and run an irrigation district. Yeah, we ran it into the ground, let's be honest. And we ran a lot of things into the ground, but we still were able to do those things. And then we're told that we could get extra funding by giving it, basically selling it to the regional district for $1 or whatever we did. And away it went. Now you're saying if and when we decide to become incorporated, that all of those things will come back to us. We did such a great job in the past. How is that going to change now?
Okay. Jason, go ahead.
How to answer this question politely. We had a transition plan that looked at the staffing at the regional district and what we would have to bring over. And we were very methodical about the times that we brought those folks over there. Because make no bones about it, this is going to be really hard on the regional district. This is OK Falls Area D is a big component of the regional district services. And in some cases, you are going to be taking some of the staff that are there because it is like buying the business. You are going to get that. You have what's called successorship rights. So BCGEU will be the union that will come over here because they get successorship when the incorporation happens. So you say, how will it be different? Well, you're going to have a CAO that hopefully meets the mindset of what council wants. And that person will drive the change that mayor and council wants to separate itself from the regional district. And working for an improvement area or a regional district is completely different than working for a municipality. When you're working for an improvement district, you're really just looking at sort of at water, or you're really just looking at fire or the parks and rec. But when you're under that municipal auspices, there's a whole bunch of other things that you're expected to do. It's funny. Not necessarily. That's what I talk about with the transition plan. I was fortunate in that I'd worked at the Central Okanagan Regional District before West Kelowna Incorporated. So I had a really good idea of the staff that we had and those that we were going to transfer over. And we had a plan to make sure that we got the folks that we wanted. That's the bottom line. What you'll have with the municipality is we're all going to wear the same hat. And the other thing is too, is when you're working for a municipality and somebody says, that's not my job description, what we used to say in West Kelowna is, you're in West Kelowna now, right? You will do other duties as assigned from time to time because that's what's needed. We're all hands on deck working for the municipality. You've got that one overarching group that you're working for, and it has all of the responsibilities, and the staff there are more empowered than what they are working for an improvement district or regional district because you have one master.
Thank you, Jason. That's great. Now, I know, sir, you had your hand up, and keep your hand up there, sir.
Hi, everyone. My name's Chris, and we are one of the young families that moved to OK Falls. We moved here about 7 years ago, and we're actually in our second house out here now. We specifically, after we sold our condo, we specifically looked for a house in OK Falls because we love this community, right? And I think incorporation is the right way to go. My question specifically for Merlin is what were you able to do to attract development to Clearwater after you incorporated?
You know, some of the things we could advocate for and have come to fruition are things like better internet service. That's a long fight. That attracted a lot of young families. We're in an interesting position right now. I did say we're 54% seniors. That's changing rapidly. Our elementary school that was we have 2 or 3 in the area actually, one in town. The elementary schools in our region are filling up. The one in town is full. I'm going to say 7 years ago, we were talking about merging the elementary school and the high school because there were so few kids. The high school will be filled next. And then in the discussion will be, if we keep having people coming to town that have kids, we may have to, the school district might have to build a new elementary school. We have attracted a lot of people into the tourism industry. We have a hospital in town, a lot of young nurses and doctors because we have affordable housing in Clearwater. You can still get a 3 or 4 bedroom house on a couple of acres for sub 500,000 if you want a fixer upper. You can get a nice place, like fabulous place for 700,000-800,000. You get one on the lake for not much more than that. So it is those opportunities. It is that economic development opportunities. One of the young families of town is a hotelier. Another one is one bought one built one. Those are the kind of people that bring new jobs to town. Another family moved out of Hinton and started a Tim Hortons. We have a Tim Hortons. Across the street is the relative, it's 15 years old, but a very young woman who used to bake bread at the farmer's market started her own cafe. It is one of the best little boutique cafes that you will run into between Kamloops and Jasper, and probably better than both of those places. It's the ability to make quick reactions. It's the ability to have people that are focused on local economic development to say, you want to start a business? Well, we can hook you up with these resources, and this is the real estate agent that you need to talk to. And oh, by the way, in the last couple of weeks, I know about new developments that are coming through. I keep a lot of this stuff. I keep a lot of stuff on. The things I have to forget or keep quiet are astounding, and a lot of them are to do with the attraction of new jobs and new businesses and new ideas to town, where people will come and they will throw things at me and say, what do you think about this? And I'll say, I think that's pretty good, but I'm going to hook you up with the CEO is going to talk to you a bit. The economic development officer is going to talk to you a bit. And it's those things that you create a good quality of life by having a town council that wants to do music in the park, wants to do beach festivals, wants to do all these sort of things, and funds them, helps the community arts group start up, keeps it going, because volunteer burnout is probably one of the worst things for communities. And one of the ways to stop that is to help fund with local taxes, those little initiatives that people want to do to make your quality of life better. All of those things all together, placemaking, as one of my counselors likes to say, helps you to create a community that attracts everybody across the spectrum, including young people. And I talked about seniors housing, but because that's important, but you also need to keep young people in your community, keep your community alive. Lose your schools, you lose your hospital, your community dies.
Thank you very much, Merlin. I've got a gentleman over here who's got a question. Before I turn to him, I did want to introduce a thought and get John and Merlin to speak to this if we could. Regional districts, a separate type of local government with electoral areas and the whole different governance around that. But regional districts can be very effective for many small communities in British Columbia. Communities that want basic services at the lowest possible tax rates or lowest possible tax cost. What, and I wonder, John, maybe with Sorrento-Blind Bay and Merlin for Clearwater, at what point, if it did the regional district model no longer work for the community? And, or is it still at the point, John, in Sorrento-Blind Bay, where despite the fact there are 5,000 people in that community, the regional district model still works very well for the community?
Well, actually, I think that the model does work very well for the community because the community really doesn't have any needs. And one thing I will say for the CSRD, which just amazed me when I got there, these people put away reserves like I've never seen before. The Sorrento-Blind Bay area would have got $7 million in reserves, you know, as part of dishing out the area. There was a lot of money, you know, that came through. And the deals that the committee with Allan made, you know, with the province and the highways and that, these were better. They basically gave us an offer and we said, no, it's not enough. You know, and then they went back and they gave us more. And that's what Jason's saying, make the best deal. And I'm sure if you had Allan right on top of this thing, you probably already have the best deal that you're gonna get because we basically squeeze money out of the stone, you know, on these things. And that's what you do. Also like the question about, you know, your water systems and that, at the regional district, when it would go bad, it's the province's problem. Okay, and so they used to call me up at the TNRD, will you take this over? I said, how much money you got? You know, I said, what do you got in reserves? And they said reserves. And I said, okay, no, if I'm gonna do that, we're gonna have to bring it up to municipal standards. We'll work out the cost and you're gonna have to pay half of that. Well, it's your problem, not ours. What's the difference between you having something that you can't handle? Because they had 2 staff. That's why they want the regional district to do it, because they have professional staff. The province doesn't have any staff. And so they would call you on a first name basis and, geez, John, you gotta do this for me. Okay, you get me a deal. I want this and I want this and that, and we'll talk. And because then I gotta go talk to the people there and tell them it's still gonna cost them a bunch of money because we're not gonna just take it over, you know, and run it like it is. The reason why they want to get rid of it is because it doesn't work. It needs a lot of work. And there's no difference between the province not being able to do it or us. Somebody's got to bring the money. And so that's what we did. And so in the case there, just got to get what you can. And I'm sure that's Allan, you probably squeezed out the best deal you can get from them and probably trying for more.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Merlin, just on a similar question then, or the same question. When and you mentioned that Clearwater had a number of kicks at the can, as it were, a number of different incorporation efforts before it decided that it wanted to make that change. What was it about that final thing that where folks decided that the regional district model, as effective as it had been prior to that, and the 3 earlier attempts, was not the right model any longer?
Yeah, and I think a lot to this lady up front here's point. Things were starting to decay. The regional district did great stuff, but there are currently 27 members of the board on the regional district. There are areas of the TNRD I have never seen, and I've been a BC resident my entire life. It is just too widespread and focusing on one particular need. We have a partnership agreement with the TNRD for funding of our sportsplex, curling, skating, things like that. The TNRD runs the library system. So there's lots of things that are still partnerships with the TNRD. Eco Depot, garbage dump is in town, but it's actually a TNRD service. So there's things that this is part of making the deal. It's what do you take on? What don't you take on? You don't have to take on everything. Some things make more sense as a regional service. But what it did allow us to do was focus on things like, I'll use a good one that's come up in the last 5 or 8 years. We needed dramatic upgrades to our sewer system. We were talking, I think, 13 or 14 million bucks for our small town. Substantial part of that came from grant funding that would not have been available to the Thompson-Nicoll Regional District. A lot of that, our city hall is actually an elementary school that was refurbished. We have a 25-year lease at $1 a year. That refurbishment was done in partnership with a local nonprofit society. They use half the building, we use the other half. All of that was grant funded. It was not money used from local taxation. Obviously, there is still money spent in that kind of process because you're using staff and that sort of thing. But I think $2 million of that renovation was outside tax dollars from grant funding from other levels of government. It is, when you get to these things, and water systems are an absolute nightmare. Regional districts all over the place are being tasked because people are getting older. They started these water systems decades ago. In the TNRD, I think a couple water systems, you're going to be paying over $1,000 to $2,000 a year just for your water service in town, because you have that ability to have a larger service areas. It's a couple $100 a year. There are things that you can do once you take the scale down to that smaller scale, very tailored to your community, that get cheaper because you're only doing what you need to do and you're not doing all this stuff, especially the regional district stuff where it's spread out such a large area to service a relatively small number of houses and people. And it's that economy of scale that really makes a difference in small towns.
Thank you very much, Merlin. I'll go to this gentleman over here who's been patiently waiting.
My name is Ray Cartwright. I've been living here 20 years. I was a young man, I guess, when we came here. The story back a couple ago, when you went on about the bridge that had to be fixed, 25% over 5 years, that sounds like more than 200 bucks we're talking about that our taxes going up. 3% for potholes, 5% a year for a bridge. I don't know. That sounds like a lot more money than we're talking about to begin with.
And so I think Merlin or Jason, that was one of you who had mentioned, I think, the bridge, just, and maybe to
brought up the bridge, Jason.
and maybe to expand a little bit on this gentleman's question, the tax implications. So we've already projected there would be a tax increase if the community chose to incorporate. We've explained that in our materials and demonstrated why that's the case. What have you found in terms of tax increases as a result of incorporation, or as some of these decisions that the gentleman referred to?
Yeah, there's definitely is tax increases, but you have to, back to the best deal that you can do up front, you need to understand what you're getting into up front. The bridge that we're talking about was added as a last minute because a couple people on the Incorporation Committee, probably against everybody else's advice, said, oh, the railway track runs on that other side. Let's get that utilities. Those utilities are worth, I think these days, everything taxable on that side of the river where this bridge crosses to is worth, I think, $60,000 to $70,000 in income a year. We're talking $23 to $27 million worth of liability there between the road and the bridge that we will have to take over when the bridge fails, and then a really bad section of road there. Don't tell anybody this, but part of the conversation over the last couple of weeks is to give that back to the province, to ask that we have a boundary reduction, because that decision in 2006, 2007 was the wrong decision. So these are the things, when I'm looking at what your plan is right now, I'm not seeing these things. I got the tour around town today. I asked about the bridges. I asked about which roads are yours. I asked about, and all the answers were the right answers from the negative parts of the conversation we had with the corporation. There is a way that as a council, we can lobby and we can advocate to government for help with that bridge thing, because we inherited, there's a long story with the bridge. I don't get into it too deeply. Stuff like that is going to come up, but that's why you have to do your due diligence up front and know what you're getting into and get the best deal. You have to understand the conditions of the water systems. I've spoken, I think, online to this study before, specifically about when you're about halfway to accepting your roads at the at the 5-year mark, 2.5-year mark, bring in a consultant that specializes in road, the state of roads and understanding of road engineering and where they are in their life cycle. That person, you bring that person in, and then you go to the provincial government and say, we're taking these roads over in 2.5 years. Let's negotiate a deal to get everything up to a good enough standard that they are sensible to the lifespan that you should inherit with things. We did that in the district of Clearwater. We got $2.5 million out of the government to seal coat and fix sections of road before we took on our roads. We should have probably got 4 or 5. But realistically, we got something. Yours are small compared to ours. Now I'm gonna have to tell the bridge story. So
that highway's not part of it.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's a problem. Sure, and I
Yes,
won't do that. Just
That's
go
okay.
ahead and ask.
Sure,
questions.
thank you. Yes, sir. You've got a question.
My name's Guy. I actually just moved to Okanagan Falls 2 months ago. So hopefully I'm not going to offend anybody by saying this, but can you tell us how you sourced your mayor and your council members and that sort of thing? Like I say, there may be very capable people here and I don't want to offend them, but is there a process involved that would, Jason, you've got a history of, City of Victoria, all that sort of, so you've got expertise involved. How do we know we're going to get somebody as a mayor and also council members that is going to,
Okay, go ahead there, Jason. Yeah.
Short answer, you don't. What are the 2 positions in life where you don't need any experience? Raising a child and being an elected official, right? The thing is they're voted in based on what their platform is. And if their platform resonates with people, they'll get voted in. That's what politics is all about. We're seeing that provincially, right? With a real dichotomy between a couple of different parties. It's the same thing in municipal elections, right? It's politics on a smaller, it's not big P politics, but it's small P politics. And in a smaller town like this, everybody knows everybody. I'll tell you, I'm working in Clearwater right now, and one of the council members got a hold of me earlier this week and said, "What have we placed here?" And she sent me a photo, and I went, "Oh my God, like, I can't believe we did that." Now, if you're at the regional district, you're going to phone your electoral area rep, who's then going to contact the CAO there, who then has to talk to the staff down below. It's a different level in its entirety. But to answer your question about the qualifications of mayor and council, that's through the elected process. You can give as much orientation as you want, but elected officials come with their own platforms.
John, why don't you give us a 30-second response while I go
Okay,
to the
yeah,
back? to
based on
answers.
that, you elect these people and in a small community like this, you probably know them. You research what they got, and if you don't like them, you get rid of them. And basically over my years, I tell you, I've seen so many dysfunctional communities where I mean, like, how do those people exist?
Yeah.
It's just crazy. But what happens is you just wait a few years, they're all gone.
Thank you, John. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, these long answers after 5 minutes, I'm done. Like, I'm chasing butterflies.
Sorry, some of us are politicians. We
Yeah,
can't help
that's,
it.
they're political and they're going around in a circle. So we figured out what our tax increase would be, and it'd be over $1,000 for our property, according to the formula. So with the added police expense, the added fire department expense, the added park expense, the roads, conveniently, the roads were all just paved. Isn't that wonderful? Huh?
Yeah.
Election year, yeah. So, what is the real implications of the tax increases? Like, what is it? The real implications, not based on a $200,000 house or a $300,000, because there is no $300,000 house in town anymore.
So we talked a little bit about earlier about assessments, taxation. So the $290 increase is based on a residential assessment of $500,000. So not 200,000, but $500,000. There is a calculator online. You've got it right there. So you've got yours 1,000. So you must have an assessment that's quite a bit higher then. So yes. What, Yes, do we know the assessment? Do we know what your assessment is? Exactly. Do you put that into the calculator? Okay, so, well, and what did the different user fees and so forth? Yes, exactly. And that's 100%, thank you for raising that. And this is one of the reasons we wanted to understand better the impact, not only as it relates to local service delivery, not only as it relates to governance and who makes decisions, but also the property taxes. So so when we look at that trade-off of higher property taxes, decision-making authority, the community needs to understand that, and we've tried to communicate that to the community over our various engagement efforts and our different events. Ultimately, it's going to be the community's decision, and each voter is going to need to determine whether or not that trade-off makes sense for him or her. We've heard from the gentleman up front that, and then West Kelowna was the same case, in each of these different jurisdictions, there were a number of different iterations before the community decided that that trade-off was what it wanted to accept at that particular point. Whether or not Okanagan Falls is at that point in its evolution is going to be for the voters here to decide. There's no right or wrong answer. It's what is acceptable to people. Eugene.
You asked about how elected officials come into place in OK Falls, but if we voted to incorporate, there's a process in place and people are put in place in the interim, and we haven't talked about that. So I wanted you to speak about that.
Okay, so, and I think Jason may be able to speak to this too, because prior to when you started as CAO, Chief Administrative Officer in West Kelowna, there were staff brought in appointed by the province initially, paid for by the province's transition. And you would have overlapped a little bit with those folks. I wonder if you can do you have any thoughts or any memories of those? And how that process worked?
We transitioned those folks out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
A consultant that comes in doesn't have that same hat that the permanent CAO is going to have.
Yes.
And so we worked pretty quickly to transition both finance and the CAO's position out. I was hired by the first mayor and council, so I wasn't hired by the province's transition team. And I knew a lot about the community, which really helped out. But the long and short of that is they will help to get things established, but they've got their own way of doing it. And the mayor and council really needs to put their own stamp on it. So the quicker you can have that transition, the better.
So the idea though was from day one, there was somebody there at least in place to get things moving. And then mayor and council came in and were able to hire the people they wanted to do the services and advise them.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Who else have we got here for questions? I think I saw somebody over here on this side. This side's really been lagging compared to this side, I gotta say. So you guys got to start coming up with some questions. Yes, at the back, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Annalise Toporowski, and I can appreciate that everything that I have been contributing in the way of my taxes is going towards our future. I just wonder, who is our future here in Okanagan Falls? For our seniors, I'd really like to see housing that we're already working on, a medical facility, and also long-term care. I know with our aging population, that's kind of important. And I have a lot of people actually approach me saying, can I take their parents in at a certain age, which I'm incapable of doing. And then for our youth, I would really like to know if there's any economic development study out there that actually says what will attract the youth here, what will keep them. Is it IT? Is it jobs? Is it recreation?
Yeah.
Is it, money for business ventures, for entrepreneurs? And would that all be available under incorporation? Would we have access to that?
I can talk a little bit about the advocacy part of it, specific to medical and doctors, because Clearwater is quite successful. We actually have a full team of doctors in town. We just had another one start a couple days ago as one was leaving. So we did that transition where there's a person in the building. Our hospital stays open the vast majority of the time. I think we've had 7 closures this year, but we were predicted to have 26 in August alone. And that's because we have a team that comes together, works, and that has been probably the number one outward, sorry. Just say it. Number one outward form of advocacy by myself and council. I have two counselors that work now because they've been such good advocates for attracting doctors and nurses to our community in the medical system. One works for rural and rural practice doctors, and the other one works for doctors of BC. We have brought those people and kept them in town, and that draws people to this town because there's basically about a list of 5 things that bring people to town now, especially young people. Good internet, functioning hospital, good recreation, good schools, and opportunity. The opportunity thing for young people has really changed. It's about lifestyle. It's quality of life. You have a fabulous quality of life from what I can see around here. You have that going for you. So you just need those other things to be taken care of and looked after, and you need local champions for that. You need people to roll up their sleeves and do those things, and it's really hard to do that based on strictly volunteers. But yeah, I think you have all the ingredients here. I think you just need to, decide whether or not you're gonna do that as a incorporated municipality or as staying as part of the regional district.
Thank you very much, Merlin. I've already come to you for a second, sir, so I've got a gentleman over there I'm going to ask first. Excuse me. Thank you very much.
Under incorporation, land that's under the agricultural land reserve, is there any change the way it's handled? And likewise with taxation, is there any change under the incorporation other than possibly a general increase that everybody receives or gets?
Well, there isn't a general increase. I mean, the municipal budgeting happens every year. There's inflationary pressures that goes as a result of that, but that rate is set by the mayor and council. There isn't an automatic static increase of that taxation. That's why you elect the mayor and council.
Let me ask and we've got a lot of time left for questions, so I don't want to preclude or prevent people from asking questions, but let me ask, if I could, the committee just a different question, and that is, one of the things we want to understand are lessons learned from communities that have, in some cases, made the decision to incorporate, in some cases, did not make the decision to incorporate. What would you do differently if you could go back to the position in which you found yourself, similar to our position here this evening, the community's position? And Merlin, let me start with you. What would you do differently with the incorporation, and the decision to incorporate, and how that happened?
Don't be all things to everyone. That's really important. The biggest boat anchor on Clearwater currently, and I said I'd talk about negatives, is the size of the district of Clearwater. The 72 kilometers of road, the equal, almost the equal lengths of sewer and water pipes, the age of things. If I was to redraw that map right now, I'd take off I take off 3 sides of that map and reduced it by somewhat rural neighborhoods, because we're really not doing them a favor. You need that density. Those rural neighborhoods are better served by the provincial government doing their roads, doing their fire protection, or other services, snow plowing, things like that. Absolutely. Those are the things that you're going to struggle with as a community. In your community, it doesn't look like you get much snow. You have very tight neighborhoods. Even the places with the vineyards and things like that, doesn't look like you're going to be doing a lot of sanding, salting, and things like that in the wintertime. Compared to other communities. Okay, so I live in a town that gets 4 to 6 feet of snow a winter. So we'll just, compared to us or Revelstoke, which has so there's a scale, but let's just put you in the bottom 20% compared to a lot of communities. So, you do have a lot going for you, because I'm looking at a place that is relatively low maintenance as far as infrastructure goes, and in pretty good shape. So your portion of taxation that's going to be directed at those things is lower than the portion of taxation that's being directed from our community at those things. And those are the ones that we struggle with. It is the fact that there is so much pipe in the ground, and we inherited stuff that's old. it is that there is so much pavement, and some of that should still be the responsibility of the provincial government, and I'm gonna do my effort to give those back to the provincial government.
Thank you, Merlin. And John, so what would you do differently? What do you think, or the community?
I think in Blind Bay's case, I think the optimum solution was made by saying no and carving out that area that now can be looked at for the future and now can have the director form a relationship with the regional district. The new director that came in, that's why I offered my assistance as their alternate, you know, basically to change from pounding on the desk to building relationships. And she, after 1 year, has become the vice chair of the regional district and build these relationships. And there is huge possibilities going forward now. I like to see that. The other ones essentially had no chance. You can't go and just keep kicking the shins of somebody and expect them to be nice to you. They're not going to do it. And those people took decades to try to do that. So I think that what was done, it's essentially the kind of thing that if all you've got to serve your guests for dinner is soup, never ask them if they want soup or not. Ask them if they want chicken noodle soup or minestrone, because now you can handle it. If they said no, what are you going to do? And so for Blind Bay's, that's what they did there. Now, they asked them, you know, we set this up. And we knew in the committee that it was looking pretty grim, you know, for this, even though the costs were low. And quite frankly, I thought it's a good idea. Now, except that I'm looking at it and thinking, geez, would I even want to take on that task? You know, like Jason did in West Kelowna? Oh, I don't know. Getting old.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John. I've got Kia here is ask a question.
Thank you. Hi, this question is for Merlin and Jason specifically. I'm wondering, after you became incorporated, what type of access did your communities have to grants that you did not have access to before? I know we've heard a lot about failing infrastructure here. Did you have specific funding that was an opportunity for you to access to maybe upgrade schools or build houses or even, you know, fix some broken irrigation systems?
And maybe the key bit there, if I may just supplement Kia's question, maybe the key bit there is that you didn't have before, because we know regional districts get grants as well. So tell us about the difference.
Yeah, there was a lot of grant funding, especially the startup years. The government wanted to help us out with a lot of things, road improvements. It's ironic right now. It's easier to get a grant for active transportation, which is bike paths, walking paths, and things like that. It is there aren't available to get your roads paved, but you can get them. You can get the path next to the road paved. Drives my citizens nuts. But it is an opportunity, right? So you know, we have a trails. We formed a trails task force in our town that basically designed the whole trail system in our town and has built massive amount of trails. I had to basically tell them to take a year or so off because they were so far ahead of the cart that staff couldn't keep up with it. There are those opportunities. We don't do schools, but you know, the closed school, we were able to renovate with outside grant dollars. I'm trying to think, pretty much everything that is not a road, and even some of the roads, has been touched by additional grant funding over the decades. And also us applying to other organizations, not just government, community forests. We had Trans Mountain come through our community mutual benefits package. Part of our sewage system improvements were paid for by Trans Mountain because they needed to use them. So we made a deal that was much strongly in our favor for them to make those improvements. They paid for basically it all and left it behind for us in excellent shape. There are lots of opportunities that you can do as locals to make those kind of negotiations that you can't necessarily do as one person at a 20-person regional district board. But to John's point and to other points, you have to choose the right people. Do not vote people out, vote good people in, have an understanding of what they stand for, and positivity absolutely gets you miles more than negativity does. The only successes, I attribute all the successes we've had with recruitment of doctors and keeping our hospital open to changing the attitude from you must do this to us, for us, to what can we do to help you solve this problem. And that has been recognized province-wide by not only the government, but by medical associations, the work that we did there. You have to stay positive on everything. Sometimes you'll have to go negative, but do it with a solution in mind that is reasonable and thoughtful.
Thank you, Merlin. Jason?
Yeah, regional districts have access to grants, but what regional districts don't do is go and advocate for those grants. You don't get 27 members of the TNRD going down to Victoria saying, we need this grant, right? It becomes that electoral area director that goes, and he's only, or she's only one person. So in West Kelowna, we had a number of septic sites in Glen Rosa, and we applied for a grant to do sewers. And we were successful in our grant because the province has an active interest to make sure it's successful. So your first few years of grants are a lot more successful than you'll get in years beyond that. So we had this grant for the sewers, and we kept tabs on this fund. We didn't get our entire grant amount. And I don't know if any of you remember Rick Thorpe. They used to call him the Torpedo. And he was anti-regional districts, and he was very supportive of us as a new municipality. So when Oak Bay turned their grant down, they got a grant for a recreation facility. We went and knocked on Rick's door and said, please, can we have this grant instead? And he actually made it happen. He transitioned that grant from Oak Bay to West Kelowna based on our advocacy. One thing to really remember, and I didn't get a chance to answer this, is when you're going through it, and if you decide to incorporate, don't make it acrimonious, right? You're going through a divorce with the regional district. I've been divorced twice before. There's a good process you can go through, and there's a really bad process. If you're acrimonious in that breakup, it's going to mean that you've got less opportunities for grants, less opportunities for people to want to work for you. The regional district hopefully has done the best that they can with what they have and what's in their toolkit. That doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that you're looking for change. Really keep that in mind, because that acrimonious relationship will get you nowhere. So if there's one thing that I would want to do differently, it would be that, is to not have that sort of bad breakup because you're trying to create your own existence saying, well, that's them and this is us. No, you know what? Central Okanagan did what they could for West Kelowna. We just outgrew them, right? And that's the way that we should have prefaced it. We just outgrew it. This is where we're going. Really make sure that you've got that positivity, because that's key.
Thank you very much, Jason. We've got a quick, oh, I've come to you already, so let me go to this woman back here if I could, and then I'll make the rounds again for seconds.
Hi, this is kind of going back to what the lady said at the front row in regards to our water system. Okay, we ran our own water system for years. I've been in OK Falls for almost 30 years, and I've watched it go down, down, down. Now we have recently handed over to the RDOS, which means that the whole reason was because our population base is too small. The RDOS will give more money for upgrades for us. Now, if we go incorporated, we are now getting back our problem, is what she was trying to say. I was thinking that. So where is our leg that we're standing on if we now go incorporation and we get back our problem that we just gave to the RDOS?
So just for clarification though, your problem, if we want to call it that, the water system, it sits with RDOS right now, but you are the only people who pay for the system. It's RDOS doesn't pay for it. RDOS manages it, but you pay for it. If incorporation were to happen, ownership would come back here and you still would be the only people paying for it. So that wouldn't change.
It's still your problem.
For upgrades, it then becomes a question I think that these gentlemen have responded to, which is what is the best situation in which to successfully apply for and receive grants. And I think we've heard that even though grants are available under both forms of government, the regional district, electoral areas, and municipalities, because of the advocacy and the focused work that can be done by a municipality and a municipal council on behalf of the municipality only, as opposed to on behalf of other jurisdictions within a broader area, that there may be and there has been in some cases, a better opportunity under incorporation with respect to receiving grants.
If I could just also mention, West Kelowna had a lot of the same issues that you've got. They wanted an urgent care facility because if there's an accident on the bridge, you're not getting to the hospital and there's no opportunity to get urgent care on the west side. And not everybody can get access to the hospitals. What I can tell you is 15 years later, they've now opened a new urgent care facility in West Kelowna. That happened through the advocacy of that council going and petitioning that every year with the province until they actually came forward with that facility. Not everything happens overnight. You're dreaming if you think you're going to get everything with incorporation off the bat. There's a heck of a lot of work that has to go into it, but the advocacy is different when you've got 7 members sitting in the MLA's office saying, we need this. And that's really important. The MLA should be coming and meeting with that mayor and council every 4 to 6 months to say, here's what our priorities are. Here's what we want you to advocate for at the provincial government. That rarely happens at the regional district level.
Thank you, Jason. Got a question over here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd just like to go back to this question that keeps coming back up. You talk about water systems in Okanagan Falls and the big circle of it coming back to us. And it never left in a sense because you've been paying for it. But when it started with you under OFID, OFID and other private systems are not eligible for grants. Okay, so period, you are paying 100% of everything. As soon as you moved into RDOS, RDOS is eligible for grants. And if they choose to apply for a grant for Okanagan Falls, then you'll get the benefit of that. We got the benefit, about 1.5 million on one set of projects that was worth 2.1. So that was a good deal. If you take it and incorporate, you can decide, I need 1.5 million is great. I've actually got 10 million that I need. I want to apply for a whole lot more grants. The way it is with RDOS, when RDOS applies for a grant, they got to look at area D, they got to look at area F, they got to look at area G and H, and then they decide from all of the needs of the water or sewer systems, which ones are they going to apply for? So the board right away may decide, it's not OK Falls time. Someone else has been in the queue longer than you have, and they're they need it just as bad as you do, and they're going to prioritize that community system over yours. If you're incorporated, Okanagan Falls can say nuts to that. We're applying for it. Okay. But we're not, we do have the choice to apply for it. Whereas the way it is now, the board or staff at RDOS will make that decision for us. Oh, well.
1 of 20. Correct. Yes. Yeah. But we can only apply through the local government, which in this, our current case is the regional district, and the entire board then determines which grant goes forward. We can't control what the provincial government does in terms of paying the money, but what the community can have influence over, what I think we're hearing, is whether the submission is made in the first place. That's a difference. So, other questions? Right over here, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Almira Nunes. I've lived here for about 22 years now, and I love this place. And I am for incorporation, given and taken everything I've heard. My curiosity is about something like Heritage Hills, where their water thing has just been bought by RDOS. And apparently there's multi-million dollars needing upfitting and all that kind of thing. If we were to incorporate, I assume that we would then take over that utility and all that upfitting. And
Yeah, and just for clarification, Heritage Hills is outside of the incorporation area? Yes. Yeah. Okay, we're saved.
That's those
I'm gonna
good
see if there's other-
choices.
Yeah, okay. I've got a question at the back here. Calvin.
Thanks, Alan. It's not so much a question. I'm thinking back about 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago, Toledo, all the houses down the water side, they could either join in with the sewage system that we have, So there was a grant for $6 million that was allocated to upgrade our our sewage system. Culleton, voted that they weren't going to do it. So regional district took that $6 million, then they moved it to Naramata. We had no choice in it. So that was applied for on behalf of OK Falls. Because Culleton said no, it was just wash their hands of it, moved it to Naramata. And as a result, it didn't meet the criteria at Naramata and then went back to Victoria. We lost $6 million.
Thank you, Kelvin. So I want to just point out, and that's a very helpful retelling of that, but I want to point out, and very accurate, but I want to point out that when we look at the regional district, RDOS and every other regional district, they're not being capricious, they're not being arbitrary, they're not being mean-spirited in moving these grants around and giving priority to one area over another priority. They are simply doing exactly what they exist to do as a local government for very small communities that have very basic needs. There are a number of different communities that are very well served by regional districts through the electoral area system. Every community has to determine for itself when, as we've heard from these gentlemen, it's no longer the best form of local government for that particular community, based on the aspirations of the community, based on the needs of the community, based on the people who live in the community, the characteristics of the community. There's no right or wrong answer. The systems are different. They all have each of them has their advantages and their disadvantages. We're hearing a lot of information tonight about some of the advantages and some of the lessons learned about making that transition, but it really does come back to the community determining when it wants to make that transition and whether it's at that point where it's outgrowing, as we've heard the gentleman at the front use the term, whether it's outgrowing the existing system. We've got time for a couple of more questions. Yes, sir. And then I'll go, I know you've got your
I'm scared to death here. We found out there's 100 good things, but every one of them, everyone says, yeah, it could be good. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that all over, especially from the desk up there, that, let's see, if I hire the right person to run it, things will go well, maybe. If I hire somebody else, well, maybe not. Everything that you said is, oh yeah, political, I'll give you. But there's been no assurances of anything, just warnings. And that's what I'm hearing from up there. What can I say? The whole package of us becoming a town, a real town, is a great idea. But we've had so many warnings from all these people around here tonight that I'm not as positive as I was when I came in. Thank you.
Let's address that. Let's start with John, and then we'll go down the line, have everybody spend about a minute on that.
Okay, bottom line, what I want to do is take a look at Clearwater and the TNRD when I was there. I actually started off with discussions on with the improvement districts that are in each of Clearwater, Barrier, and Sun Peaks, and all of them. And what the problem was, except for Sun Peaks, was they had sewer systems or water systems that needed massive upgrades, and they couldn't get any grants. And so basically I went and talked to them, and they said, have you got any money? So they can't give you any money. You know, we have to have a service to get money, and that means you have to surrender your system to the regional districts, and then we can apply for grants. Now, we can probably be successful at getting that, a portion of it, like maybe a third or a half from the province, but you're gonna have to pick up the difference because we're gonna have to bring it to municipal standards. And I said, now your other choice, of course, is that you people can incorporate. We're quite happy to let the people, local people, run the place themselves. And so in the end, both, you know, Clearwater, Barrier, and Sun Peaks, they all took the incorporation route. And I'm happy to hear, you know, from Merlin that it's worked out. And I've heard in Barrier, it's worked out there too. And there was almost no. Yeah, they're very happy with that. What I'm saying is, but when we did this, when we started those discussions there, hey, Merlin's counterparts, you know, in the other places, and then the then now mayor of Barrier was on the improvement district at the time. You know, well, I don't know about this. And I said, well, it's your choice. And what's your guarantee it's going to work out? Well, there isn't any. You know, it's as simple as that. But it's one of your avenues, and this can solve your problem. The other one is just you have to hand it over to us. You have to lose control. They weren't willing to do that.
Thank you, John. Merlin.
Yeah, and I think why we're here today, you know, I could tell you great things about Clearwater. We've had a wall of successes of grants achieved over the years, of donations, of all those things. But we're not here necessarily just to do that. We're here to tell you to avoid things that we made as mistakes going into our corporation. And that's why you hire somebody like Allan, so that who's been through this multiple times with multiple communities and has seen those mistakes and knows which ones to avoid. So we're telling you cautionary tales about things that we wish we could have done differently. But we have a good water system. We have a good sewer system. We need help with the roads, but that's not something that the provincial government's interested in. We have the ability to advocate, but I'm going to make them interested in it. Because that's what we do. Because I can do that at a table. A council can do that as a table of 7 people dedicated to this community that we sit in and everything that surrounds the table, the meeting table that we're at. We can do that. We are not one of 20. And on that point, I also sit at the RD board. So I am also part of that table of 1 of 27 to have a voice at there and to sit as another municipality with, I don't want to use Kamloops example this week because it's not very good. But with the mayor of Logan Lake and the mayor of Merritt and the mayor of Lytton, who I have breakfast with when I go down to meetings with, and we talk about solutions. There is a table beyond the table where we look for solutions. We look to work together. We go into rooms with, Ward Stamer is the mayor of Barrier. I go into rooms with Ward Stamer to advocate, and the local First Nations to ministers meeting to advocate for all the communities in our valley. There are things that you can do as not that one person sitting at the table of 20 that you can do as your community, and then making friends, making partnerships, advocating together, networking, all those things that sound really horrible, but actually work very, very well.
Thank you, Merlin. Last one here to Jason. I'm going to ask Rick then to come up.
That question is a little bit asking about whether or not my kids are good people, right? I'm always going to tell you, yeah, it worked out. What I'm trying to do is be real with incorporation. For West Kelowna, I think it was probably the best thing that could have happened for that community. Rather than being sucked up by Kelowna, they've created their own identity. They've got their own infrastructure. They've got a pride in amongst that community that they didn't have before. They now have their downtown city hall. They've got their west side emergency center. All of the things that were thought about in corporation have come to fruition. That's not meant to say that there aren't bumps in a road. That's just what you have to deal with in local government. It happens. Do I think it's going to be unsuccessful? No, you just have to do it methodically. You've got Allan, who's the architect of a lot of these things that have gone very well. And it really comes down to a choice of the community. Do you want to continue with the governance you have, or do you want to change the governance? And here's what you get for that governance change.
Thank you, Jason. Rick, it is 1 minute to 8. You want to come up and thank our panelists? Well, okay. Personal question to me. Okay, yes. Well, the answer is yes, but I want to qualify that. I want to, when we use the term fail, that's a very loaded term. Sorrento-Blind Bay chose not to incorporate. It was a very conscious choice. Oh, I see. No, I have not been. Yes. So the question was just, have I been involved in a situation such as this in a municipal or in a community that chose to incorporate, that then didn't work out so well. And I said, no, I haven't. I'll pass it back to Ray. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Alan. It's been a great evening, actually. I think we've all learned a little bit. At least I have. This is the biggest turnout we've had, actually, at one of our public meetings, which is really encouraging to see. We've heard some good things and some not so good things, I guess. But our job as the committee is to review it all, put it all together and make a recommendation. And based on what we've seen over the last 14, 15 months, the committee will get together in the very near future and try to make that decision. And it's through your efforts that we can do that. Thank you very much. Now, I'd just like to say thank you very much to our panel. That is extraordinary for these gentlemen to come quite a distance in some cases. So we've given them a little token of Okanagan, which is, of course,
It clinks.
wine. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Alan, thank you very much. Yeah, look forward to talking to you tomorrow.